Other conflicts of interest, I had mentioned this before. We used to call them goofy doctor plans because physicians tend to do this a lot. They use plan assets to buy properties, or they title commercial properties within their 401k because it can't be attached if they get sued for medical malpractice. Don't do it. If you have good people behind you, they won't allow you to do it. And then, you know, the other part is a foundation steward selects service providers based on charitable contributions rather than their expertise. There has to be a process in place that you can articulate as this is how we found our providers. This is what we used in order to pick the best. And the cheapest is not necessarily the best. Policy prudence. Any organization that assumes a fiduciary role should have a code of ethics with provisions governing fiduciary behavior. What that speaks to is the idea that if I have somebody that's my treasurer, my HR person, we would hope that they had financial savviness in their personal life. A lot of times it's if you've had a bankruptcy, if you've had financial difficulties, foreclosures, it has to be disclosed. But again, this is one of the yearly things that you would hope people within your firm and then your service providers that would be considered co-fiduciaries would be willing to sign. If you are a securities dealer, you have to, with the SEC, disclose any lawsuits that you are involved in, any bankruptcies that you may have had, any financial misfortunes that are of public record. And then it's just a matter of communicating this is going to be a yearly requirement, put it in your file behind one of your tabs, and date it by the year. How to spell relief. What is one of your first lines of defense? RFPs, requests for proposals, and RFIs, requests for information. You can go and shop the market. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are making a change, but it does give you a quick acid test as to how much things cost, what they are costing, and who's out there providing them and what services they offer. You don't have to do it every year, but we advise that you at least look every 3 years. Examine your current documents, examine your current providers every 3 years. Doesn't mean you have to fire them if they're doing a great job and they're doing everything that you need them to do, but can't set it and forget it. Service agreements and contracts are in writing and do not contain provisions that conflict with fiduciary standards of care. Service providers fully disclose in writing compensation arrangements and affiliations involved in each engagement as well as their fiduciary status. If I am getting paid by your accountant for referring, must be in there. If I am going to accept co-fiduciary status, it must be in there. Verbal does not count. Agreements and contracts are periodically reviewed to ensure consistency with the needs of the managed assets. Happens often. We start with a small plan. We have explosive growth. We no longer have, and this is very important for your filings with the IRS, small plans are 100 participants or below. We see a lot of companies with 200, 250 participants that are still filing as a small plan. You are not a small plan and you've just painted yourself red for the IRS. These are very simple things that if you have a working agreement with your accountant that are easy things to avoid. Another thing that will happen if you have a large plan of over 100 people is you have to get an independent audit of your plan. One of the things that happens that is another huge red flag, if you hire an independent auditor and the independent auditor files a disclaimer opinion that says, we didn't get the information that we needed, therefore we appreciate getting paid, but we're not going to give an opinion on the plan. Hope that works out for you guys. We don't ever want to be in a situation where disclaimer opinions are used. It's prevalent because for the most part they presume that you are not going to reach your 5,500. The larger the plan gets, the thicker the 5,500 is, and the more in Greek it's written in. Agreements and contracts are periodically reviewed by legal counsel. This can get expensive, and that's why it's really important to have it done right the first time, and then know how you can modify as you go through. If you have a plan in place, as I said before, it's not the end of the world if things need to be done to fix it. Just make sure that that you can structurally change things within your plan so you don't have to get new documents drafted. If you have an agreement that can't be retrofitted, then you have an agreement that can't be retrofitted, pay the money to get it done. Trust me, it's worth it. consideration, as I mentioned before, is given to putting vendor contracts back out to bid every 3 years. We had an advisor that actually used to handle the municipality monies of the city of Fort Lauderdale. Went through, and these are hundreds of millions of dollars in municipal bonds, again. Went through a process where he wanted to have these practices and procedures in place for the city of Fort Lauderdale. And it turned out that because he didn't make the cut as the advisor, he fired himself essentially because he said we need to have RFPs in place, we need to, look for service providers that do X, Y, and Z, and he excluded himself because he didn't qualify. But that's okay because foundationally, it was much better off having those in place than not. Any questions so far? Good? This is probably the easiest one, and again, because we're not dealing with physicians who think that they can put things offshore. Assets are with the jurisdiction of courts and protected from theft and embezzlement. This happens a lot of times with highly litigious fields where assets are held offshore, where they can't be attached. Swiss, Cayman, the Swiss bank window is closing. As we've seen, there's going to be disclosure of numbered accounts and who's associated with them. Cayman Island, it's a huge red flag to the IRS, so a lot of times accountants aren't even having people do it anymore. ERISA fiduciaries have the required surety bond. I had mentioned the surety bond before. This is the easiest place to be in non-compliance and the easiest thing to fix. 10% of assets, make sure it's reviewed annually. So, part one of our 4-step process is organize and to review. We want to know what the rules are to our various, for our various roles. Define the roles and responsibilities of those that are in the game with us. Assure that there is no self-dealing. Manage service relationships. Be proactive in them. Apathy is a huge violator of this. I've got 9,000 other things to do. Make this one of them, and at least make it a priority, and make sure that you can show that you've made it a priority. And assure recourse if things go wrong. You do not want to be in the situation where you go to the Buick dealer and hope that he's going to help you out because you've just, taken out the concert pianist. You want everybody to be pulling the sled in the same direction. And the Department of Labor is going to require that, and that's why there's going to be a lessening of people in the environment that will do this type of work. We are good. Step 2 would be, okay, once we've gone through this process and we've given you all gray hair and stressed you out tremendously, what the heck do I do with it? It's formalizing. We have the nuts and bolts. We have the meat and potatoes. It's turning it into a Wellington. It's turning it into something that's delicious to eat later. What are the things that you need to be looking for when you hire an advisor? When you pick an asset class for your plans? I mean, this is not what you do. And if this is not what you do every day, or if you turn on CNBC and you get that glazed over look, you're not alone. So the things that you need to look at are time horizon. How old are your employees? What does your census look like? Who's going to be participating in the plan? What are the vesting schedules associated with that plan? The risk level and tolerance. The little old ladies at the knitting circle that do child care for Centra, they have a different plan need than the 20-year-old something truck drivers that have 40 to 50 years of work ahead of them, that can suffer market attrition because they, again, can work. Expected return. Most people, human nature is I would like to have the highest producing return always, and I'll pick that. What I would say to that is that a heroin addict wants heroin. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to make it available to them. You need to have investment in returns, pick asset selections where it's not sexy, but it gets the job done. You are not there to trade options. You are not there to give them access to alternative investments. It is slow and steady wins the race. Retirement is not supposed to be jazzy. Asset class selection, asset class implementation, and monitoring. This is where it is very important for the process that you pick a good advisor, and that advisor within has a set process that they can explain to you as to how funds are selected for mutual funds. or for retirement plans. Traditionally, within 401ks, 403bs, the asset that is available is mutual funds, not individual equities. It allows broad diversification and economies of scale without having the money to put towards it. IPS is the business plan. I mentioned this before, we'll go into it detailed here, is that the IPS is your guide, and the IPS should be something that's readable by anybody that picks it up and needs to be, because just because you are accountable for the 401k plan now, 403b plan, doesn't mean that you always will be, and you need to have a working document that others can use. Optional SRI screens, this is more for endowments. It's for socially responsible investing. A lot of people, especially if you are not-for-profit, are sensitive to, I don't want to participate in any companies that sell or make monies from tobacco or have child labor practices, things like that. You don't find it so much outside of the endowment rule. So, formalize what? Your asset allocation, because prudent experts diversify unless unusual circumstances make it imprudent to do so. This was something that happened in the Bank of America profit sharing and 401k plan many years ago, where the asset selection that was available within was you could invest in Bank of America stock or 4 funds. And if Bank of America stock is producing 15-20% returns prior to market correction, why the heck would I go into a mutual fund at 6%? And so what we found in the Bank of America plan is that a lot of people put all of their monies into the Bank of America stock, and then this foreclosure thing happened. I don't know if you guys have been aware, but the housing market is not nearly as strong as it used to be, and for some reason Bank of America is not making nearly as much money as it used to. Oops. Whoops. Investment policy statement, because it is the business plan for the management of the portfolio. Nobody expects you to be a savant when it comes to investment management, but they do expect you to know, if you have accepted the responsibility of having this plan, to know enough to be dangerous. And so we need to get you to a working level of knowledge to where you feel comfortable making these types of decisions, and just a little bit can go a long way. This is the most boring part. It really, really is, and I look at it, I sigh on the inside. So I have tremendous empathy for you sitting in this plot, in where you're sitting, and I'm going to try to make this as interesting as possible. An investment time horizon has been identified. This is census of your employees. Make sure that we have, in a case of defined benefit retirement plan, defined benefits is not a defined contribution thing. Defined benefit is a pension. There is a benefit to being old, which means that I don't have to go in and select. It is my employer that is selecting, and after I reach a certain level of service and years of service, I will get a distribution. That is more on the accounting side. We need to make sure that it's funded, that we have things in place. Pensions are, the GE, the GM pensions are held out because there's such a large population of people expecting those to bear fruit, and in the case where they've been underfunded, they have not. In the case of defined contribution plan, which are 401k plans, 403b plans, the investment options must address the range of investment time horizons. Must be appropriate for all people, so we need to make sure that it's comprehensive and that it's flexible. You don't need to go into the foundation of endowment, because if you think you've got bad news and headaches, boy do they ever. And the retail investor, a lot of times people don't recognize that if you yourself are participating in the 401k, you are a retail investor. You should have the ear of the advisor that is associated with this plan, so you can ask questions that are not just pertaining to your 401k, but okay, how do I allocate my 401k in relation to monies that I have outside? That is comprehensive advice, and it should be there. And then the sufficient liquid assets for contingency plans are maintained. Liquid assets are very, very important for ESOPs, as well as, endowments. Any questions? Good. Defined benefit plans. We mentioned that before. Nobody here has a defined benefit plan within their company? No? Good. Essentially, it is an accounting nightmare. You don't want to. There's a reason why the defined benefit plan is going the way of the dinosaur. It is very easy to reach critical mass.